Currently, Earth. It was on November 5th in the year 1556 that the Mughal victory assures Akbar's ascension. 50 miles north of Delhi, a Mughal army defeats the forces of Himu, a Hindu general who was trying to usurp the Mughal throne from 14-year-old Akbar, the recently proclaimed emperor. The Mughals, whose culture blended Perso-Islamic and regional Indian elements, established an empire in the north of India in the early 16th century. Victory at Panipat assured Akbar's ascension, but the empire he inherited from his father was greatly diminished after decades of Mughal defeats against the Hindus and Afghans. Under a series of able regents, and then under his own brilliant leadership, Akbar brought the Mughal Empire to an unprecedented glory, extending Mughal power over most of the Indian subcontinent. Akbar the Great, as he is known, was as capable as an administrator as he was a general, and he twice married Hindu princesses to ensure the unity of his empire. Although he never renounced Islam, he took an active interest in other religions, and his court was a center of learning and culture. Akbar continued his eternity in 1605. The Mughal Empire declined in the 18th century. It was November 5th in the year 1605, early in the morning. King James I of England learns that a plot to explode the Parliament building has been foiled, hours before he was scheduled to sit with the rest of the British government in a general parliamentary session. At about midnight on the night of November 5th, Sir Thomas Knyvet, a justice of the peace, found Guy Fawkes lurking in a cellar under the Parliament building and ordered the premises searched. Some 20 barrels of gunpowder were found. Fawkes was taken into custody. During a torture session on the rack, Fawkes revealed that he was a participant in an English Catholic conspiracy to annihilate England's Protestant government and replace it with Catholic leadership. What became known as the Gunpowder Plot was organized by Robert Catesby, an English Catholic whose father had been persecuted by Queen Elizabeth I for refusing to conform to the Church of England. Guy Fawkes had converted to Catholicism, and his religious zeal led him to fight in the Spanish army in the Netherlands. Catesby and the handful of other plotters rented a cellar that extended under Parliament, and Fawkes planted the gunpowder there, hiding the barrels under the coal and wood. As the November 5th meeting of Parliament approached, Catesby, or Catesby, enlisted more English Catholics into the conspiracy, and one of these, Francis Tresham, warned his Catholic brother-in-law, Lord Monteagle, not to attend Parliament that day. Monteagle alerted the government, and hours before the attack was to have taken place, Fawkes and the explosives were found. By torturing Fawkes, King James' government learned of the identities of his co-conspirators. During the next few weeks, English authorities killed or captured all of the plotters and put the survivors on trial, along with a few innocent English Catholics. Guy Fawkes himself was sentenced, along with the other surviving chief conspirators, to be hanged, drawn, and quartered in London. Moments before the start of his gruesome execution, on January 31st in 1606, he jumped from a ladder while climbing to the hanging platform, breaking his neck and continuing his eternity instantly. In 1606, Parliament established November 5th as a day of public thanksgiving. Today, Guy Fawkes Day is celebrated across Great Britain every year on November 5th in remembrance of the Gunpowder Plot. As dusk falls, villagers and city dwellers across Britain light bonfires, set off fireworks, and burn effigies of Guy Fawkes, celebrating his failure to blow Parliament in James I to kingdom come. On November 5th in 1862, 300 Santee Sioux Indians were sentenced to hang in Minnesota. In Minnesota, more than 300 Santee Sioux Indians are found guilty of raping and murdering Anglo settlers and are sentenced to hang. A month later, President Abraham Lincoln commuted all but 39 of the death sentences. One of the Native Americans was granted a last-minute reprieve, but the other 38 were hanged simultaneously on December 26th in a bizarre mass execution witnessed by a large crowd of Minnesotans. The Santee Sioux were found guilty of joining the so-called Minnesota Uprising, which was actually part of the wider Indian wars that occurred throughout the West during the second half of the 19th century. For nearly half a century, Anglo settlers invaded the Santee Fox territory in the Minnesota Valley, and government pressure gradually forced the native peoples to relocate to smaller reservations along the Minnesota River. At the reservations, the Santee were badly mistreated by corrupt federal Indian agents and contractors. During July 1862, the agents pushed the Native Americans to the brink of starvation by refusing to distribute stores of food because they had not yet received their customary kickback payments. The contractors callously ignored the Santee's pleas for help. Outraged and at the limits of their endurance, the Santee struck back, killing Anglo settlers and taking women as hostages. The initial efforts of the U.S. Army to stop the Santee warriors failed, and in the Battle of Birch Coulee, the Santee Sioux attacked, engendering 13 American soldiers to continue their eternity and wounding another 47 soldiers. However, on September 23rd, a force under the leadership of General Henry H. Sibley finally defeated the main body of the Santee warriors at Wood Lake, recovering many of the hostages and forcing most of the Native Americans to surrender. The subsequent trials of the prisoners gave little attention to the injustices the Native Americans had suffered on the reservations and largely catered to the popular desire for revenge. However, President Lincoln's commutation of the majority of the death sentences clearly reflected his understanding that the Minnesota Uprising had been rooted in a long history of Anglo abuse of the Santee Sioux. Today, we also remember the 38 Santee Sioux who continued their eternity on this day in Minnesota. On November 5th in 1994, George Foreman, at age 45, becomes boxing's oldest heavyweight champion when he defeats 26-year-old Michael Moore in the 10th round of their WBA fight in Las Vegas. More than 12,000 spectators at the MGM Grand Hotel watched Foreman dethrone Moore, who went into the fight with a 35-0 record. Foreman dedicated his upset win to all my buddies in the nursing home and all the guys in jail. Born in 1949 in Marshall, Texas, Foreman had a troubled childhood and dropped out of high school. Eventually, he joined President Lyndon Johnson's Job Corps work program and discovered a talent for boxing. Big George, as he was nicknamed, took home a gold medal for the U.S. at the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City. In 1973, in Kingston, Jamaica, after winning his first 37 professional matches, 34 by knockout, Foreman KO'd Smokin' Joe Frazier after 2 rounds and was crowned heavyweight champ. At 1974's Rumble in the Jungle in Kinshasa, Zaire, the younger, stronger Foreman suffered a surprising loss to underdog Muhammad Ali and was forced to relinquish his championship title. 3 years later, Big George morphed from pugilist into preacher when he had a religious experience in his dressing room after losing a fight. He retired from boxing, became an ordained minister in Houston, and founded a youth center. A decade later, with the millions he'd earned as a boxer pretty much gone, Foreman returned to the ring at age 38 and staged a successful comeback. When he won his second heavyweight title in his 1994 fight against Moore, becoming the WBA and IBF champ, George Foreman was wearing the same red trunks he'd had on the night he lost to Muhammad Ali. Foreman didn't hang on to the heavyweight mantle for long. In March 1995, he was stripped of his WBA title for refusing to fight number one contender Tony Tucker, and he gave up his IBF title in June 1995 rather than fight a rematch with Axel Schultz, whom he narrowly beat in a controversial judge's decision in April of that same year. Foreman's last fight was in 1997. He lost to Shannon Briggs. He retired with a lifetime record of 76-5. Pretty good. Outside of the boxing ring, Foreman, who has 5 sons, all named George, and 5 daughters, has become enormously wealthy as an entrepreneur and genial TV pitchman for a variety of products, including the hugely popular George Foreman Grill. The historic information divulged and documented over this audio file can be verified on history.com.